Mr. Chairman, this is a sad day for the environment and for America's great natural and cultural heritage. H.R. 2584, with its deep cuts in important environmental and natural resource programs, an amazing array of special interest riders and funding limitations, falls far short of meeting our responsibilities to protect and wisely use our nation's natural resources. The bill before the House today is more than $2 billion below the current spending level, and it's almost $4 billion below the President's request. It's even $324 million below the level of H.R. 1 that was passed by the House just in February. Given the Subcommittee 302B allocation, I do recognize the difficulties that Chairman Simpson of the Subcommittee and Chairman Rogers of the full committee and their excellent staff faced in crafting the bill. I do appreciate his efforts, Mr. Simpson's efforts particularly, and Mr. Cole's, to protect funding for American Indian programs. I only wish that that protection could have extended to other important portions of this bill. But as bad as the funding in this bill is, what is most disappointing is the scope and extent to which the majority has filled this bill with extremist legislative riders and funding limitations. The bill is short on needed funds and long on anti-environmental riders. H.R. 2584 is not so much a spending bill as a wish list for special interests. Oil companies, cattle grazers, industrial agribusiness, miners, and those who wish to pollute our air and water for greater profit all have their special provisions tucked away into this bill. It is a dump truck of provisions for special interests. In addition, this bill picks up where H.R. 1 left off and includes dozens of deep cuts in conservation and environmental protection programs, while the extractive or consumptive uses of our public lands are shielded from cuts and given a pass from complying with our nation's landmark environmental laws. We continually hear from the majority that the pain of budget cuts has to be shared by all. But in this bill, they have chosen winners and losers. The extractors and the exploiters and the despoilers of the forests and the animals and the people who depend upon clean air and water. They have chosen winners and losers. The former are the winners, the latter are the losers. The animals, the environment, the forests, the waterways, they all lose. This bill continues the majority's assault on the Environmental Protection Agency with deep cuts. After the EPA budget was cut by 16% in the current fiscal year, the majority is now proposing a further reduction of 18% for next year. In other words, a 34% cut in environmental protection. Cuts of nearly 40% are made to the Clean Water and Safe Drinking Water grant programs, just at the time when the states and localities have run out of money to try to provide for clean water and to deal with stormwater overflow and all of the infrastructure that is necessary throughout our country. When the majority says it wants to rein in the EPA, what they're really reining in is the ability to protect clean air and clean water. I'm extremely disappointed at the majority's decision to prohibit funds for the Endangered Species Act listing and critical habitat designations. These are the vital first steps needed to begin the recovery process for 260 species currently at risk of extinction. Under the guise of sending a signal to the authorizing committee, this bill attacks the very heart of the Endangered Species Act. Wildlife programs overall are hard hit by this bill. State and tribal wildlife grants are cut by 2/3. multinational species conservation by a fifth, cooperative endangered species conservation by 95%. Even funding for the National Wildlife Refuge System will be cut by 7.5%. Our national parks and forests, wildlife refuges, wilderness areas, and other conservation units deserve better than what this bill provides. As stewards of these magnificent resources that were passed down to us, we have a responsibility to defend and preserve them for future generations. Spending reductions like the 78% cut to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, nearly 80% cut to the Land and Water Conservation Fund to the lowest level it's ever been, and the 33% cut to the National Landscape Conservation System will place at risk some of our most precious resources. I'd also like to note that this bill is about more than our natural resources and the environment, and while the a small portion of the bill, they're a vital part of our communities. They do enhance our economy and our way of life. Yet these programs and activities would receive substantial cuts under this bill as well. I'm also struck by the contradictions contained in H.R. 2584. Here are just two examples. On the one hand, the bill allocates millions of dollars to restore the Everglades in Florida. Yet the majority includes a funding limitation that will permit the pollution of the Everglades. The bill also includes funding to deal with the continuing fallout from uranium mining on the Navajo Indian Reservation. Yet it includes language that will expose the Grand Canyon National Park and the millions of Americans who depend upon the Colorado River for their drinking water to the well-known dangers of uranium mining. And they give away the publicly owned uranium to a foreign-owned Asian mining company. I appreciate the gentleman's comment. Imagine giving away publicly owned uranium, giving it away to a foreign firm. The list of legislative riders and funding limitations in the bill is long. NEPA waivers, limitations on judicial review, blocking of air and water pollution controls. Whole legislative texts have been dumped into this bill. These riders and limitations have nothing to do with deficit reduction and everything to do with carrying out an extreme ideological agenda. Repealing environmental regulations doesn't save money, it costs money. Keeping toxins out of our air and water is a great deal cheaper than cleaning up the damage or dealing with the adverse health effects. Preventing the Deepwater Horizon disaster would have been far cheaper than having to clean it up after the fact. Each rider or funding limitation seems designed to benefit one industry or another. These provisions have become the new earmarks, with 39 such provisions already in the bill, and more are going to be proposed to be added. While this bill rewards businesses and industries that seek to delay or undermine environmental protections, it penalizes others who try to do the right thing. As just one example, American Electric Power recently announced it's going to stop work on a low-carbon coal-fired power plant, carbon sequestration, showing it can work, but they're going to stop work on it in light of the pullback in regulating emissions related to climate change. They see what the Congress is doing, they see what their competitors are doing, so they decided not to do the right thing because we're making it too expensive to do the right thing. With the funding cuts and special interest provisions, it's no wonder that the Statement of Administration Policy on H.R. 2584 runs 5 pages with its veto threat. I concur with the administration's views on the bill, and under general leave will submit the administration's statement. We owe it to our constituents and our communities to protect the air we breathe and the water we drink, to protect public health from the dangers of mercury and arsenic and lead. Imagine we have more than 500 coal-fired power plants in this country, and they emit more than 78,000 pounds of mercury, and yet one drop of mercury will poison an entire lake. That's what we should be looking to, and not tying EPA's hands. We ought to be good stewards of the abundant natural and cultural heritage passed down to us. President Johnson noted in 1964, and I'm going to quote, "If future generations are to remind us and remember us with gratitude rather than contempt, we must leave them something more than the miracles of technology. We should be leaving them a glimpse of the world as it was in the beginning, not just after we got through with it." Mr. Chairman, H.R. 2584 falls far short of our responsibilities to present and future generations, and so I obviously oppose the bill, and I'll reserve the balance of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.